Hello and welcome to Mythic Mind, where we pursue wisdom on the paths between primary and secondary worlds. I'm Dr. Andrew Snyder, and I'm glad that you're here. Hey there, welcome back to our special year in review episode of Mythic Mind. Now, in this conversation, several members, several patrons of the Mythic Mind Fellowship come together. In fact, I think this is probably the biggest conversation that we've had, not counting some of the courses. We may have had some more numbers in some of the chats for the C.S. Lewis course. But as far as just the podcast content goes, this might be our biggest chat regarding the numbers. And so it was a good time as we reviewed some of our favorite books and games and movies that we've engaged with in 2025. I really enjoyed the conversation. You'll get some recommendations out of this, and I hope that you enjoy. All right, welcome to a special episode of Mythic Mind as we take a look back at 2025 as each of us experienced it individually, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of our collaborations and some of the chats that we had along the way. And so this is just a chance to talk to the many people who showed up, very fortunately here, and talk about the things that we've accomplished, whether you have something to plug or just something to talk about, right? That lets us know more about you and the things that you've been up to in this past year. But again, if you have things to plug, by all means, feel free to plug away. Then we'll just go in rounds talking about things that we've read that have stood out to us that we would like to recommend, things that we've played, things that we've seen. So just year in review, kind of hitting on the various domains of what Mythic Mind has been up to in this past year. So I guess we'll start with things that you've done or things that you've experienced. Kind of whatever you want to do with that. I think it's good to start on that kind of personal level, let people know a little bit about who you are before we get into the recommendations and the stuff that we have to share. So, and I would say for me, one of the biggest changes in my life, especially as it relates to what I've been able to do with this group, is going to teaching purely online. That's been a huge change for me, which I mean, I like teaching in the classroom, and I miss teaching in the classroom. Like, there's so much about that physical presence that just adds to the teaching dynamic that really can't be fully replicated online. But at the same time, my heart is in doing things like this that I've been able to do a lot more of precisely because I have the time to do it. And so being able to cut out that commute, being able to cut out just spending all day on campus is giving me a lot more flexibility to do things like this, as well as to engage in other opportunities, such as signing a contract for writing my first book, which was technically due a while ago, but I have a very gracious publisher who's been working with me. And so my plan is by the end of January now to have that finalized. So I'm writing my manuscript on divine honor in the Lord of the Rings, pulling from Tolkien's letter 183, when he says that the principal conflict in Lord of the Rings is not about freedom, which is what kind of how a lot of times it's framed, sort of liberation theology through Lord of the Rings. It's kind of Tolkien society stuff. But Tolkien says no. The conflict is about God's sole right to divine honor. Like that's what it's about, and so that's really what I'm digging into on that. So let's go around here, and if you don't have anything in particular to share, that's fine. We can always skip you. So no pressure to come up with something. I'll go clockwise as I have you on my screen here. Kyle, what do you have for us?
I was terrified of being first, but I was looking at where I was in the lineup of cameras. So I will say this year has actually been very, very beneficial for me, largely because of your group, Andrew. Because I've begun to take maybe just the humanities more broadly, more seriously, right? So I started to read again in college. Never really did it that much growing up. I started to read again. I got interested in reading, but what happened is I kind of just drifted into like the popular culture, Brandon Sanderson world, and that's where I was until 2020, the last year. And the way that I kind of understand it is those books are good in that like they're like popcorn. It tastes good, but it's no substance. There's no calories to them. And me knowing that I wanted to write something as well, I knew that I should begin to eat things with substance, right? I need to know what that tastes like. I need to know what that feels like. And your course with Lord of the Rings was one of the entries to do that. Because I read it years before, but I read it casually, without looking too deeply, without thinking too deeply, and I enjoyed the story at a surface level. And so I came here, um, and through here is where I found a good community of people, again, that are like-minded towards me. And it's kind of just been uh, beneficial to have these people that are obedient in the same direction. Um, and yeah, I don't have any accomplishments to share currently because I'm, halfway through my zero draft. But I just want to say, from a mental point of view, there's been a shift in the way that my mind has thought about these problems, and a shift in the way that my mind has thought about how I want to approach what it is that I don't know, feel maybe some provenance in my life to do. So
Well, that's fantastic. Appreciate you sharing that. And I'm sure that you will have some things to talk about when we do this next year. But for now, it's definitely very encouraging feedback, and that's exactly what I want to do here. So I appreciate that. All right, Dalen, what do you have for us?
So this past year, it's been a fairly full year for me. Just I recently moved halfway across the country, and so that's been eating up a lot of my time. But in general, I work a normal day job. I'm not a creative. I don't work in the creative arts. But one thing that I have found value in over the past few years, but especially over this past year, when considering some of the options that have come up for like generative AI and how that can replace in some ways the small stories that we tell our children, and like really finding value in creating, silly little stories that I tell my children without, relying on the crutch of uh AI, like just sharing, bits and pieces of the stories that I love with them in different ways has been something that's been extremely meaningful to me this past year, and just seeing how they pick up on those little pieces and starting to introduce them to some of these stories is something that I've really loved.
Yeah, if you have children, or even if you have children in your life, I mean, being creative is part of your calling now, right? And so I definitely can appreciate that. There's such enrichment in telling stories and reading stories, telling stories, creating stories through play. Like there's so much to be involved in that, and so that's definitely a very creative enterprise. That's good. Michael, have you done anything creative recently?
Yeah. So this year was I finished my science fiction Western series. I've been spent the last 7 years writing and independently publishing. Book I put out book six, Even Song. It pushed the series just over 1 million words. I did a count. I thought it was 900,000 words, and I did a count a couple weeks ago on all the final files, and it was 1,005,000 words. I was like, got that number. So I'm very proud of it. It's if you want the hook for it, it started in 2018 before the current AI phase, but the backstory is basically that humanity grew too dependent on AI, and when the AI suddenly disappears, civilization starts to crumble. So a lot of people, once they hear that, they're like, "Oh yeah, that's kind of where we're looking at right now, as we kind of offload parts of our brain in bad ways to a machine." But I'm very proud of it. It's I've never spent 7 years of my life on a single project before. I can tell you that. So that was very, very happy to do. Because of that, I did not get to read as much or do or see as many movies because I've got small kids too. I've experienced less this year because it was a hard working year. But uh, I'll have a couple things when we get there that I think at least a couple of these other guys have looked at too.
Well, good. I mean, that really is incredible. I'm glad that we have a published author in our midst here. Maybe we'll have to do an After Moses book club at some point.
That terrified me because he's like, you guys are doing Tolkien, and then, oop, here's the little guy. I make no pretenses that I'm writing the highest art, but what I like to say is, Tolkien talks about how he, as a kid, he really loved stories about the Red Indians, right? And we don't actually know specifically what he's referring to. There's some theories, Last of the Mohicans, and some other stuff too. but I like to say that I think I can make Red Indian stories. I think I can make stories that people love as a kid that maybe inspire them to go on and make better things.
You know, we don't have to hold ourselves to the standard of writing like Tolkien, but if we can write the kinds of things that at some point in his life Tolkien might have liked,
Mm-hmm.
that's a pretty high accomplishment. Just
That's
ask Lewis.
that's what I'm aiming for.
It's good ambition. Uh, Kit, what do you have for us?
Well, let's see. This year, I finished up my first year leading a Bible study, which is pretty much the start of the year, and that was going through Revelation. So a lot of studying different types of eschatologies, and yeah, that was a lot of fun and a lot to really, mull over. And now starting this year, this is with Bible Study Fellowship. So we're doing the exile right now, and I'm leading about 14 guys through this. And so it's a little intimidating, but first year was a success, so now this one. And then this year also, instead of just consuming all the video content that I've been doing for years, me and my buddy decided to start our podcast, The Academy's Captive Audience. So we've been going through the Oscars and just doing random years and seeing what the culture was like at that time and seeing not so much whether or not they got it right. I mean, what's set in stone is set in stone. You can't take away from that. But clearly, you listen to the way people talk about certain films, then you're going to end up with a lot that's left on the table and a lot that's kind of pushed to the side, but still very influential. And it's just fascinating to see what they chose over what people actually enjoy, maybe. But I don't know. Sometimes I side more recently with the best picture winners than not. But some of those years, I mean, oh man, did they get it wrong? And it's really interesting to see that. So
You'll have to join us sometime for our movies show and lend your expert opinion.
I really want to. Yeah, it's especially since, that's not in the best picture category all the time, but I don't know. I'm gonna push for an Indiana Jones at some point. That would be
Hey,
a lot of fun.
I'm always on board with Indiana Jones. Christopher, do you have anything for us?
Thanks for letting me join in, I guess. Not
Yeah.
fun. I when I was an undergrad, I did like a special honors program that kind of was initially pretty C.S. Lewis focused, so it's always interesting to kind of get in on like the Lewis stuff. Um as far as me, I don't have too many I guess creative outlets myself so much, but I try to help uh with a little side gig that I do, um writing code and doing some data analytics for like a small little startup where people are making TV shows and movies and stuff. So try to help out there to help others do what I can't, I guess.
That's cool. I miss creative stuff that I know nothing about. That's
Right.
cool. Cool. Um, Micah, what do you have for us?
Yeah. So, man, lots happened in my life this year. So I work in the church IT space and in like live streaming like church services and video. And I got promoted to a tech lead position this year just by default because the previous one left. And I was like, oh, well, now I get a lot to learn now. So, I get to be stressed out every Sunday morning that things break for like all the churches we serve. So, yeah, because as you might imagine, video is complex. There's a lot going on there. Um, as far as like other things, so I am attempting to follow the same path as Michael in also writing a series, but I don't have any books out there for anybody to buy at this point. But I finished the first draft of the second book in a series this year because I have not put the first out. I'm trying to get a lead up of multiple that I can put out, hopefully in relatively quick succession because I am not a fast writer. And so that felt good. So I'm working on the second draft now. I don't have like a full pitch for it, but as far as like how it relates to our discussions, y'all might find it interesting. Like I'm doing a lot of work in my stories to deconstruct the common like kill god trope from that you see in a lot of JRPGs and a lot of fantasy media, where the villain is like a god. And a lot of time when you look at it, just philosophically, it's like, well, if you think about like who God is, we understand God to be, these people who they're fighting are not actually gods. So, what if characters like understood that and then like tried to explore what that means? So, I view it as kind of like I'm trying to deconstruct deconstructionism as much as I can, which is an interesting area to explore. And it's all in like a sci-fi fantasy environment, which is all really fun. So, yeah, that's kind of where I've been at. And I had started on this these conversations this year because I saw Andrew you'd put out a call for talk about Final Fantasy, and so I was like, hey, I like Final Fantasy, so and I've never been on like a podcast or anything, so let's see what this is like. So thank you for letting me join for that.
No, thank you. I appreciate you being one of the three of us who's been solid on the Final Fantasy stuff. And yeah, I definitely appreciate your aim of deconstructing deconstructionism. It's much needed for that, leaving us thereby with reality. So take that, Kefka. All right. David, what do you have for us?
Which one?
Oh, Lady David.
Okay. Well, a fun thing that I did this year that was a little out of my comfort zone is I went to the Vintage Computer Festival Southwest as a an exhibitor, and I brought a bunch of Japanese computers and video games and Laserdisc things and set them up on tables and explained what all of it was to people who showed up for that. That was down in Richardson, Texas. And I sold a bunch of like extra Japanese stuff that I had. And my wife and son came. Well, my son had his own table, and my wife came and helped me run mine. So that was fun. And I'm looking forward to doing that again next year. And because my work sent me to Ireland, as you know, in October. And so my wife and I made a trip out of that and stayed 10 days. And that was just a wonderful experience. And thank you, Andrew, for suggesting that we go to Glendalough because that was a beautiful day going down there and checking that out. So I came home from that sympathizing with the IRA more than I ever expected to, but I'm not. I came home with a whole Spotify playlist of Irish rebel songs that I've been listening to quite a bit ever since. But creative wise, I've been trying to work more on my YouTube channel. I had a couple of videos see some success, not really particularly videos that the nature of YouTube often is the videos that you work the least on see the most success, and the things that you want people to embrace just barely see the light of day. So I made a short 2-minute video explaining a confusing mechanic in Clair Obscur Expedition 33 that I got quite a few hits on that, and that increased my subscribers are up to like 4,500 now. So what I'm working on is I went to Japan last year, and I've written a script just for here's how our trip went in case you are interested in that sort of thing. So, but it's basically 2 hours of footage. I'm going to do one video a day. I've got almost three of them done. Uh, Much like what Micah was saying, I want to get a lot more in the can before I publish any of them, but they're about 10 minutes a piece, I think, is where it's mostly going to shake out. Um, but yeah, that's my hope for next year is to just try to build up the momentum of my own YouTube stuff and in the spirit of Michael, consume less and produce more.
Yeah, well, that's great. You definitely have a lot of fun things to share there. But yeah, I definitely noticed that about YouTube. You know, I'll have all these like 2 hour book analysis stuff that gets like nothing, and then I post a 15-minute philosophy of Morrowind video or something, and just goes crazy.
Yep.
uh, yeah. All right, Reverend David, what do you have for us?
In terms of creative stuff, I don't really have anything in in that regard. An experience that I had this year, I got to go to Washington, D.C. for the first time this year. A friend of mine got married in Virginia, so there's just something about going to a place that you've only ever seen in books and TV shows and things like that. And to not only see something like the Washington Monument or the White House or any of the other great buildings that I swear we're all within like a 15-minute walk of each other. Um, you know, it's impressive to look at that stuff and it gets you to, reflect about each of these things. What is the good that have heard, and what has that done for our nation, our society, and things like that. I'm thinking about this now because I wrote a reflection earlier today on a passage in Isaiah, right? And you have Isaiah giving thanks for um, for the Lord's mercy, right? And in order to give thanks, you have to reflect, right? You have to remember, what did this person or thing, do? So the same thing goes when you experience something, right? You don't just think about how it made you feel, but you think about how you experienced and what the value of those experiences are. And so, just walking around BC and reflecting on all of the history that has not only gone on in that city, but the things going on in history that led to those things happening. Um, that was a really fun day, and we're actually planning on going back to DC in January because we got to spend like what felt like only 5 minutes at the Bible Museum. So we're yeah, third week of January we're heading down there. But I plan to consume more valuable forms of media for the coming year. Um, I've been bugged by a couple of people now to go read the Silmarillion finally. So looking forward to that. So that's yeah.
Yeah, I happen to know a guy who's leading a study on that in the near future, if you're interested. Yeah, there's definitely something significant about being in a place where you kind of feel the historical weight. Now, I live in Virginia, so I mean, DC it's still cool to me, but it's lost some of that splendor. But I think of when I was in like when I was in Rome, right? Places of like great historical significance, like you just kind of feel it, and I don't know, it's an existential. I guess all experiences are existential. It's kind of repetitive, but you just I don't know. There's something heavy about that, and I appreciate. Now, you said you're not involved in anything creative, but you were a leading voice on Mythic Mind movies and shows for our Star Wars run. So that's, I think that counts. All right, Ian, what do you have for us?
So this was my first trimester teaching music for K through 11 at a local Christian school, and that's been very exciting, very challenging, and a big blessing. In terms of creativity, I continue to have three podcasts that I produce myself, in addition to contributing to this one. One on Batman, one on the Star Wars X-Wing novels, and one on the Terminator film and TV series. So you can tell that I'm very much into the science fiction and nerdy stuff, and I will continue to do so. I'm really glad that I have an option to have this community where we can really do a deeper dive than just, oh, Aslan is Jesus. Okay, yeah, that's true, but like, let's go a little deeper. So I appreciate this group a lot for that.
Good. All right. Well, moving into the next round, let's talk about any book recommendations or things that you've read over the last year. I mean, if for some of you, maybe that's a short list. For some of you, it might be a little bit harder to narrow down. But I'll start off with just a few. When I think about the ones that most stood out to me, going back to the very beginning of the year, those of you who have listened for a while, maybe you participate in some of this, the Poetic Edda. We started off with a study on this in the beginning of the year. I can't even really call it a study. I'm not an expert, but we read along and talked about it for a few episodes. And For one thing, there are a lot of just really interesting stories here, just on a narrative level. I'm really interested in mythology, but also you get a better insight into the mind and the values of the Germanic peoples. And if you like Tolkien or Lewis, a lot of this is going to stand out to you as like you're going to recognize the roots that they're drawing from here. A lot of the stories, a lot of the ideas, a lot of the cultural elements are very much pulled right into Tolkien, even right into Lewis, even in ways that you wouldn't necessarily expect, like in Narnia and stuff, because of the way that it gets shaped for the youth. Some of it is a little bit harder to detect unless you're actually reading the source material. But one of the best ways to get into the mind of Tolkien or Lewis, and obviously both of them are really important for this group, is not just to read books about them, even though you should read mine, but the best way to learn more about their minds is to read the kinds of things that they read. And so if you like Tolkien, you like Lewis, then I definitely recommend reading some of the Northern myths and legends. If this is a little bit too intimidating to you because some of it is kind of hard to read because it's a lot of it's poetry. It's the Poetic Edda. You might want to start with something like the Saga of the Volsungs, which reads a bit more like a novel. It's a bit more of a straightforward read, and it deals with a lot of the kind of material you get towards the end of the Poetic Edda. So that's one recommendation for you. And then just one more. I won't blather on about books for the rest of the night. For the course that I led on Plato, Stoicism, and Till We Have Faces, I read I read a lot more of the Stoics than I had before in their like, complete works. I had read a number of some of all of these texts, but I read Incompletion through Epictetus's Discourse, Fragments, and Handbook, Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, and Seneca's Collected Letters. And I recommend them, any of them. I mean, if I had to pick one, I mean, Marcus Aurelius is the most well known and probably the easiest to read, but I really liked reading through Epictetus. I think that there's a pretty clear reason as to why a lot of the early Christians had a great appreciation for the Stoics. To the point where you get most likely apocryphal stories about connections between Paul and Seneca because Christians so much wanted to redeem some of the Stoics, and especially if you read the likes of Boethius or something, you really see how the appreciation he had for Stoicism. And so even though that doesn't provide the full picture, and as Christians, we're definitely going to have some critiques there. I think that as far as they go with their pagan wisdom, they go pretty far in ways that are pretty easy to contextualize within Christianity. So that's what I want to plug: Poetic Saga of the Volsungs and the Stoics.
I'm not volunteering myself to go next, but I just want to say the introduction to book 5 of Meditations is one of the favorite things I've ever read, where he talks about the way that the bee goes about its business and its toil without complaint and does what it's made to do. And yet
Right.
it's this uniquely human thing to be slothful and to struggle against that which we are made for, and the encouragement he gives in overcoming. That's one of my favorite things ever. So I have a special place in my heart for Marcus Aurelius. But
Yeah, that's a great section. I believe that's when he's saying like, yeah, why are you lying in bed? Do you not remember what it means to be a human?
yeah,
Yeah, that's fantastic. Um, well, I mean, keeping the order. Kyle, do you have anything to plug
I was
or
hoping we were going to
recommend?
sneak it like a NFL fantasy draft. Um, okay, so thinking back to this year, the book I enjoyed the most was Out of the Silent Planet. I just thought it was fun. Um, I liked Sparalandra too. I haven't finished that Hideous Strength. I have to own that. So I'm going to try and finish that by the end of this year because I have a pile of 4 books that I have to finish. The Inferno, Paradise Lost, that Hideous Strength, and Orthodoxy. I won't be able to finish all of them in the next 9 days. I looked at the calendar and realized, oh shoot, it's December 22nd. There's no way I'm gonna finish the stack. But Out of the Silent Planet is the most fun. Till We Have Faces is my favorite, though, if that's like a weird statement. Like Till We Have Faces is a slower burn, and it's you know, there's maybe like less little hits of dopamine from the action of the story as you go through, but it's so profound. It's just my favorite book, period, out of anything I've ever read, I think. Um, so I would highly recommend that always. And then I think I'm gonna stop there. I would recommend Paradise Lost too, but I also feel like a poser saying that because I haven't finished it. So that's on the list.
I'm pretty sure Milton would want you to finish that Hideous Strength.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, that's it's a great list there. And Till We Have Faces, I mean, it definitely makes sense to make that your favorite. It's probably my favorite single volume text. I mean, obviously, I have to give my favorite to Lord of the Rings, but as far as single volume novel, I think I have to give it to Till We Have Faces. It's a fantastic work. I mean, like you said, it's a slower burn because to me, it's the most quintessentially Lewis, and he would agree with that. He said that's his best novel, despite the fact that it didn't get the kind of popularity some of his other works
Yeah.
got.
It's so funny speaking to my friends that are maybe just, normies a little bit that have only ever heard of Narnia. And you talk about the Space Trilogy until we have faces, and I'm like, what? He wrote other things? Having only ever having read Mere Christianity and Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. Granted, I actually have to admit, I've never read Narnia. So that needs to be a disclaimer. But I know I am a poser. I'm a poser to the uttermost.
All right, so you need to finish that Hideous Strength and then read Narnia.
And this because it's Advent that we're recording this, I will also say, and I do this every year on the Incarnation,
Yes.
you got to read, and the Lewis introduction especially, um, where he has this wonderful introduction about reading old books, and he has a rule for every one new book you read two old ones, which is a good rule. And actually, Andrew, now I remember what I was going to say earlier. Don't buy it yet. Buy it sometime next year when I tell you. But shoot, what's it called? At the Back of the North Wind by George MacDonald. I
Oh,
got nervous
yes.
there. And you'll have this great introduction written by Dr. Andrew Snyder.
Yeah, so don't buy it yet.
Don't buy it yet. Wait until we give you the heads up, and then we can have a nice book club on it.
Yes, that would be fantastic. All right. Dalen, do you have any books to recommend?
Yeah, so this year was kind of an interesting one for me reading wise. I actually reread a number of my favorite books, just due to either book clubs that I'm in or friends who I was trying to get to read them. So I decided to read it with them. So a few highlights are A Canticle for Leibowitz, fantastic science fiction that deals with an order of monks in a post-apocalyptic wasteland trying to preserve um, knowledge and rebuild civilization and like kind of the trials and pitfalls that come from that. And then also Hyperion by Dan Simmons, another classic science fiction novel that takes the form of the Canterbury Tales. But as far as new books that I wanted to talk about a little bit here tonight, I read Gillian Bradshaw's Arthurian trilogy, starting with Hawk of May. Um, this is a series that I was not expecting to like as much as I did. I'm not big into Arthurian mythology, but in this, every character, even Mordred and Morgause and those whom are the villains, you can understand where they're coming from, why they are the way that they are, and the struggle between the light and the dark is really compelling. And I think even though it's written from or written by someone who I don't think is a believer in the Christian God, there is a strong through line of um, just there is good and there is evil in conflict in the world. And I found it to be an excellent trilogy.
At least in my experience, actually, I'm not going to say my experience. I'm going to say it's objectively true that you can't really tell a good story apart from having some framework for good and evil of like what gives things value. And so, even if it's not coming from a Christian, I think that has to be there in some level. So that's good. I need to read Canonical for Leibowitz because, for one thing, a lot of people have talked about it around me, and I just haven't read it yet. So I feel that kind of draw to it. Also, on the more popular level, I'm going to be doing some Fallout stuff, and so I feel like I need some good balance with my post-apocalyptic settings here. Oh, I think things moved around on me. Um, uh, this might not be the same order then. Kit, what do you have for us?
Well, let's see. A lot of what I've been reading, audiobook wise, I get more opportunities to listen to what I'm actually trying to understand. And a lot of that had to do with Hollywood history and Oscar history. I can't remember the names. It kind of all blends together because I'm just trying to create the mental image to try to pull out what the statue was made out of, who was the model for the statue, which is left up to time. We don't know. But there's a few people that claim it, just fun little things like that. So that's the curse really of listening from an audiobook standpoint versus actually writing it down and taking notes. But one book that I really enjoyed this year was G.K. Chesterton's The Man Who Was Thursday. And that's just I listened to it once and it was just a ride. Shorter book. Everybody's an anarchist. Everybody's trying to go after each other. And eventually the God character, which is Sunday, just overpowers everything. I mean, that's like the briefest flyover that I can give it without actually doing it enough justice. Just it was whimsical and it was just something that really stuck with me. And I can't go into everything, but now there are things that remind me of it, and it's like, everything that I go back to, it's an enchanted book. So on top of that, I'm in the middle of reading Dr. Michael Heiser's Unseen Realm, the re-release of that, or the extended edition. Just getting another read through of that, and discussing it more with people at church, which I found out there's quite a few people that know Heiser's. So it's like, oh, well, this is very interesting. I'm at the right place.
The publisher actually sent me the new edition of the Heiser text. I need to read through. I listened through most of the original edition through audiobook, but that's definitely the kind of thing that you need to have in front of you to fully follow along. He says a lot of interesting things, and even though well, maybe I shouldn't comment too much on Heiser. We're going to get, it's going to become all into that. And so, okay, we'll talk about Heiser another time. But he's definitely an interesting fellow for sure. And, I really do need to read some more Chesterton. I've read bits here and here. I think the only full text I've read from him is actually Orthodoxy. So I need to pick up some more. All right. Micah, do you have any books for us?
Yeah, so I typically read a lot of science fiction and fantasy, which most of what I read y'all might consider the more popcornish type, because I do appreciate like a well-told story, even if like the themes are not like super in-depth. But I think the series, well, I finished a series this year that I think of all the things I've read, y'all would find the most interesting is a series called The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne, which is a an epic fantasy, which has, I think, some inspirations from Celtic mythology and maybe some from Viking as well. John Gwynne in real life apparently does like Viking reenactments, and you look up pictures of him, the dude looks like a Viking, and there's typically a picture of him with these two huge dogs, and like you can tell he loves animals. But anyway, the series itself, like I don't know how to like efficiently pitch it, but it's like a big epic fantasy where all these countries are fighting and there's an evil force which is trying to take over, right? Nothing really unusual there. But the mythology behind the world is actually really interesting from a Christian perspective because it's clearly not written to actually be Christian, but it takes very obvious Christian influences, to where like you have like angels and demons fighting in the background and they're kind of trying to manipulate the human players to do what they want. And it's one of the most accurate takes I've seen in a story for how like demons tempt people to get what they want. So like there's a character who thinks he's basically a messianic character because the demons are telling them that he is. And then eventually he realizes, oh, I'm not. I'm actually a bad guy. But by that time he's in so deep and he just feels like he can't repent, so he keeps going. And the characters are really interesting. Like you can tell John Gwynne has tons of affection for his characters. And he really wants you to hate the villains because you will really hate the villains in the story. So very clear delineation of good and evil, which is kind of refreshing given how much of fantasy it tends to try to blur the lines between good and evil. This series does not. Like Faithful and the Fallen is very specific about it. But yeah, starts with a book called Malice. I just finished it this year. The last book's called Wrath. I think he takes like some inspiration from Paradise Lost and how he like named the books or something. It's like Malice, Valor, Ruin, and Wrath. But really good series.
Michael, have you? I know you've been spending most of your time writing things. Have you been reading anything along the way?
Yeah, so I've read a few books by some fellow indie authors this year, and reading indie is always a weird experience because you're going to find more quality control things because they're people that can't spend thousands on editing and things like that. But you find gems that are strange that don't belong to the normal publishing world. If you there's some fantastic things out there. You're like, no publisher on the planet would ever publish this, right? This year, the gem, and this is one of the favorite independent things I've read, and I've hawked this on Twitter numerous times. So if you follow me, you've seen this. Travel by Star by Paul Scott Grill. It is a Western fantasy that is very much what I kind of say is it's C.S. Lewis by way of Louis L'Amour, right? And Louis L'Amour was the very oh yeah, it's Kyle just said in the chat that he's been reading it. Yeah, it's very good. Um, Part of what is so good about it, it's not perfect. I've got some little criticisms of it, but part of what makes it so good is it's one of the best attempts of somebody I've seen in the modern era of really making all the prose matter, if that makes sense. So much of it is filled with little poetic moments and little moments of wisdom as it's this kind of this travel log story as they're moving north in search of the city that everyone says is gone, you know. But it's very good. I really just cannot recommend it enough, especially for people that like Lewis. There's a very an older style of thought and philosophy and heart into it that you just don't see in the modern era. But I really recommend it. Think it's really good and worth reading. Travel by Star by Paul Scott Grill. So that's who I'm plugging. That's what I'm plugging.
I would second that. Just to jump in, I bought it when it released. I've picked it up and put it down over time. I think I'm finally at the part where the story's picking up a little bit better, so it'll keep my attention. But some of the chapters I was reading today, he is picking the tradition back up in a way that moderns have largely left it for the last 60 years. It's worth it. And the prose
Yeah,
is good too.
there's I read it and I'm like, oh, I'm jealous of some of these passages of writing. It's like, oh, I wish I could write that well. It's excellent. It's long. It's long. It's a long book, and it's not always paced super fast. It's a travel log western with some pretty big fantasy elements to it. So it's good.
That's good. I'm interested. I need to engage more with like contemporary and indie novels. I feel like if I'm going to take the time to read fiction, just to be honest, I tend to pick up things that are old and tested by time. But I definitely see the value there. And plus, there's great benefit in knowing that you could talk to the author, which I can't say
Right.
about anything else that I read.
I saw a tweet today that said the average reader reads 700 books in his lifetime, and like the voracious reader will read about 4,000 if you read one book a week. And so you do have to be careful with what you pick. But at the same time, counterpoint, you also want the tradition to continue, and so you do need to, at some level, participate in the contemporary because the contemporary will become the classics,
Right,
and you
because
want it to continue to develop.
either we've written all the books that deserve to be written at this point, or we haven't. So if we haven't, you still have to be finding and figuring out and winnowing where is the good stuff amongst all the chaff. And and there's and it's hard because the modern publishing world, not even none of the Christian publishers, none of it are really interested in C.S. Lewis crossed with Louis L'Amour, right? That's just not something that someone's going to publish. And so there's a lot of these gems hidden out in the indie world mixed with a lot of junk. One very good thing though, Amazon lets you read the first few chapters between the blurb. You start with the blurb, you go down and read a couple of the best reviews, a couple of the worst reviews, and if you start looking at that prose, you can usually tell pretty quickly if this is completely not worth your time. You know, sometimes somebody can write prose and can't tell a story. That happens, but usually you can get an idea pretty quick. So I haven't been disappointed with my indie reads very often. There's a couple I was disappointed with, but mostly you can weed out the bad stuff and see who's out there desperately trying to be heard and writing strange stories and crossing bizarre genres. Another one of the better ones I read. It's not a Christian story at all, but it was a book. This was last year, but it's named Hacking Galileo, and it's by Fenton Wood. That's his pen name, and it is an '80s kids adventure. So think Goonies crossed with hard sci-fi, and instead of and basically it's a bunch of wannabe like little hacker kids in the '80s, and they're going to hack a NASA satellite to save the world, and it is fantastic. It's like written as a memoir of somebody remembering back to their adventures as a kid, and all the computer stuff is like real and accurate. And so sometimes it's very technical, but he makes it fun and it's so bizarre. And they end up in Soviet Russia because NASA's not letting them help. And so the Soviets are helping them save. It's so bizarre. It's so much fun though. So there's weird stuff out there. So again, that's why you got to kind of go for you got to find that, like I said, you got to find that new stuff. Either we've written all the stuff that matters already and you can only read the classics, or yeah. And I don't think we have. It's hard to find them in our current landscape. Our current publishing landscape does not reward the good writers or the thoughtful writers at all.
Yeah, I think that both Michael and Kyle both raised some important points in that exchange, that we do have a good reason just for personal enrichment to find the hidden gems that are out there that aren't necessarily going to be in your face otherwise, that you're not going to find in the bookstore or wherever else. But also, I would say that as people who are interested in the humanities, people who are interested in literature, like we have an obligation to do our part in shaping what contemporary texts are going to become classics, or even if the word classic might seem too ambitious, to determine what is going to be forefronted, what is going to last. And so I think that there is good reason to seek out those good indie writers and promote them and do your part to try to solidify them more organically. So there's a lot to think about there, and maybe there's more that we can talk about in like a distinct episode about indie authors, and maybe we could engage with that some. All right.
Start with this one. If you like Lewis at all, start with this one. It's ambitious. It's very ambitious for an indie work. Okay, I'm done.
No, that's good. All right. Christopher, do you have any books to plug?
Yeah, I'll recommend the one I've been reading through with my kids lately. And so setting C.S. Lewis down for a second and picking Lewis Carroll up. His two-series book, Sylvie and Bruno, and Sylvie and Bruno Concluded, are what I'd recommend. And kind of given the fact that I've only ever run into two people who have read it before or know it exists, and the nature of the book, I kind of wonder if I didn't make it up in my own head. But like, basically you have this narrator who he himself is like constantly drifting in and out between the real world and the Fey world. And sometimes you'll have a character in one world start a sentence and then a character in the other world finishes it. So you don't have like any warning like all the time as to when the switches are happening. But like kind of throughout the book, you'll go from this Alice in Wonderland kind of whimsy and craziness and just kind of silliness, and all of a sudden you find yourself into a deep conversation about the efficacy of prayer, or like what masculinity is, or like the nature of, or like the risk of actually saying you like a piece of art versus just being a critic. And like just all these like kind of social, theological, and like political conversations that kind of pop in and out between like just all the nonsensical stuff you'd expect out of the Alice stories. And I don't know, I really liked it, but like I said, I saw it in a like kind of I saw an article about it in an obscure math journal I was reading once. And the only other time that I'd seen anyone talk about it was some, feminist English professor who absolutely hated it, like some YouTube video. And outside of that, no matter how many times I recommend it, like I haven't found anyone else who's actually read it. So I'm going to recommend that.
Well, good. It sounds like if it's the kind of book that that professor doesn't like, then it's probably something worth reading. So I'm not familiar with it, but it sounds really interesting to me. I'll have to pick it up.
Like I said, given the nature of the book, I wouldn't be surprised if I made it all up. And like I'm just like touched in the head because it's it's a trip.
Well, if you ever do dream up a book like that, I recommend writing it down.
I mean, I got I got it here,
Okay, so it is real, unless we're all dreaming
I
now.
think. Yeah.
All right, cool. David, do you have any books for us?
Well, last year, I think I probably read more books than I'd ever read, largely because I was in your Lewis class and I read all of that and I was reading other things besides. But this year, honestly, I don't think I read any books. Uh, so I'll have more to say on later portions, but I will say um, I picked up and started reading this week The Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius because I'm sick of hearing everyone in this group and other places talking about how important that book is to them and how it affected their outlook on everything. And so I'm enjoying it so far. So I know one book is nothing. I'll be honest with you. I picked up the exceedingly nerdy hobby of building Gunpla, like Gundam models and things this year. And so when I get home from work, I've been winding down by building and painting little plastic models rather than reading. So next year, I hope to do a bit more reading than I did this year.
No shame. Do you see my entire Lego City street back there on the
Nice.
back shelf?
Yeah.
That's cool. So yeah, I mean, as you're tinkering, you can meditate on the moving wheel of fortune and the enduring goodness of God.
That's right.
That's good. All right, Reverend David, any books for us?
Yeah, a couple. So I actually this year just finally finished reading The Hideous Strength. We had started it a couple of years ago, and as unfortunately, which is more my fault, whenever my wife and I like we read a book together, we tend to like stop for long periods of time and then pick it back up. So we actually finished that Hideous Strength this year, and then like I'd say within a week or two of that, you had posted a video um on it, and while we also started reading, oh, what is that book? Deeper Heaven. I had a friend from seminary who recommended that book. We haven't finished it yet, but um, just it is interesting how much that book makes so much more sense the more you start to understand the deeper things that Lewis is addressing there. And so I have a greater appreciation learning more about the book, having after finished it. Um, but that said, Paralandra, I think, is still my personal favorite, just from a theological standpoint. But the only book I technically started in this calendar year and finished, because I have a lot of other books I finished, is the Apocrypha. This is the first book that I bought for my theological library and just hadn't ever fully finished it. And this particular one is has Lutheran notes, so there are some introductory thoughts that Luther and Gerhard um, had with it as to what is good about it, and but at the same time why we don't consider the various books part of the canon of Scripture. And as a side note, I think with the Oliphants, Luther what or Tolkien was inspired by First Maccabees. But it is interesting. You can see why some of these books are not to the level of Scripture, but you see a lot of the good that is in these books nonetheless. And then the other book I'll mention, which in one sense, I'm two-thirds of the way through it. In another sense, I'm like maybe a quarter of the way through it. Um, is this book, On the Lord's Prayer by Tertullian, Cyprian, and Origen. And the fascinating thing about it, especially in Cyprian's commentary on the Lord's Prayer, is that you see how the theology, especially in Lutheranism, that we have, isn't just stuff that Luther and every other Lutheran pastor has made up or reworded sense, but you see this connection to the early church, right? The way that Cyprian talks about the various petitions to the Lord's Prayer. You can't necessarily see it here, but I have a Lord's Prayer poster. And Luther, for his explanations, is pretty much just verbatim quoting Cyprian in these explanations that we teach to children. And so it is in one sense, it's a very comforting thing knowing that we're still confessing that same faith that they were 1800 years ago. And in another sense, it's like, okay, the next time I teach confirmation, I now have so much more that I can now draw from. So those are my main reads, if you will.
And I definitely recommend that, if you've read the canonical scripture at least, that you do pick up the Apocrypha. I mean, historically, most Christians would recommend that you read it. That's edifying if you don't treat it as scripture. So yeah, I definitely do recommend that. And back to when you were talking about that hideous strength and deeper heaven, when I was putting together my C.S. Lewis course, I was actually surprised by the amount of scholarly attention that's been given to the entire trilogy. Christina Hale does a good job with like medieval cosmology and introducing that sort of thing, which is obviously important for that series. Although my favorite ransom secondary text is David Downing's Planets in Peril, which does some of that, but it also just hits on a lot of different aspects of Lewis. Although I probably should mention that I have a endorsement printed on a collection of essays called Life in the Silent Planet, so I should probably endorse that. Cool. Ian, what books do you have for us?
So many. I'm going to have to try and figure out how to prioritize. I think since my brother Dalen promoted a book that I recommended he read, Hawk of May, I'm going to recommend a book he recommended I read, which is the Spiral War story series by Joel Shepard, the most recent book of which is Precursor, came out in June or July, this summer at least. And it's a space opera dealing with issues like AI, military allies who become enemies, and vice versa, the ethics of dealing with different civilizations, history, what makes us human. And it does all the kinds of things that you can enjoy in a very fast and action oriented way in a video game series like Mass Effect, but it takes full advantage of the literary form and it dives into the ideas, and it really tries to be internally consistent in a way that a lot of us critiqued Mass Effect as not being. So if you like Mass Effect but wished that it kind of lived up to its potential, I'd really recommend the Spiral series. I also read After Moses by someone in this chat. I read it alongside another book called Ten Low. Both of them are very much science fiction westerns, and I really appreciated the contrast between After Moses's Christian but not preachy. At least it did not feel to me preachy. I really appreciated the way that the characters were much more about living out their faith than necessarily being like, and here's our micro sermon for today. Next to a much more secular, very gritty type of thing in Ten Low. And so, as a huge fan of the Firefly TV show, getting different flavors of that that allow it to expand in more philosophically nuanced ways was really fun. Also had a chance to read a play called The Score about Bach. It was recently on in England, starring Brian Cox and his wife as the composer Bach and his wife, Anna Magdalena Bach, dealing with the Frederick the Great. At least I think it might have been Frederick II. One of the Frederick tyrants who kind of marched around Europe with his army, kind of terrorizing people. And it's definitely not the best play I've ever read, but I really appreciated the way it dived into Bach's faith and the pursuit of excellence as a musician and relationships between Bach and one of his 20 children, CPE Bach, who was also a composer. And so, yeah, if you are a classical music fan, if you like Bach particularly, and if you would like some more intellectual discussion, dialogue, fictional depictions of a strong and thoughtful Christian who is a titan of composing. I mean, there are only like 4 or 5 composers in the entire history of the world that are comparable to Bach, and I think that the score does a good job of showing the kind of intellect, talent, and hard work that takes alongside faith and deep thoughtfulness and political and moral engagement. So those are the priorities. I guess I read tons more, and if we talk more about stuff, I'd love to talk about those. But I really enjoyed those 3 or 4 technically.
Well, it definitely sounds thoughtful, sounds edifying, and I like the idea that's been talked about in the chats about putting together a full list of our book recommendations, and both for general viewership to engage with, as well as just for each of us to look over and engage with some of these things that we're recommending to each other. Now, so for the next round here, unless there's anything else anyone wants to say about books before we move on.
I would
Yeah.
also recommend, I remember this now, Theo of Golden. It's a nice, hopeful, redemptive story that takes place in, it's been a few months, in like a small town in Tennessee, where essentially this homely old man wanders into a coffee shop. There are these portraits along the wall. Each of them have been painted of a different person that lives in the town, and he purchases them, and then he goes to deliver them to the subject of the portrait. And so you have all of these different biographies of these different people in this town, and it's that kind of just like small southern cute and profound story. It's very good. It's a very good book. I remembered it as the conversation went on. I would highly recommend that one as well.
And then when he shows them their portraits, do they like become really old? And oh, wait, that's Dorian Gray.
That's Dorian Gray. Yeah.
Cool.
I did want to
Yeah, go ahead.
throw one recommendation out just in general to try to, if at all possible, read books in community, like engage other people with what you're reading. I never really joined any book clubs or did anything like that. I was always much more of a solo reader into the last couple years, and I've just found that reading in community can bring out aspects of books and even books that you hate. Like discussing them can really bring out things and uncover truths that you may not find otherwise.
I definitely second that in just this podcast as well as in book clubs, and even just reading alongside like people on Twitter. Like there's this whole movement of people reading Count of Monte Cristo on Twitter right now that I think is fantastic, and just people posting their thoughts. And so if you have a Substack, if you have YouTube, if you have people at church, just talk about the books, spread it around. It really does help.
Yeah, that's great, and I would definitely echo that. And ideally, find people in your real life that you can have these conversations with, that you can have these clubs with. And for our part, I would love to have more book clubs, even have like different ones running simultaneously. If we had different groups of people doing different things, I'm fine with that as well. And so I would love for us to work on that. Maybe I need to figure out how to structure that better moving forward. But well, for the next round here, maybe we'll do movies next because I feel like that's probably going to have less conversation. And so,
Question.
yes.
Do movies include TV, or is that going to be separate?
Sure, we can include TV. So movies and TV, we'll put that together. Things that have particularly stood out to you within the last year. So don't just pick things that you watch every year. I really don't have very much to contribute to this category. I can't think of a single new movie that I saw this year. Now, maybe something will come to mind as we move along, but for now, I just really don't have anything to contribute. Kyle, do you have any movies or shows to plug or talk about?
I'm with you. My wife and I watch Survivor once a week as those episodes come out, and that's pretty much it. So I'm gonna have to defer. Although Survivor's a great show. So 50th season's coming out in spring, bringing back some old returners.
Oh, I haven't watched since season one. I'd be so lost. All right.
I do think if I was ever on Survivor, I would definitely win. I have the utmost confidence in myself about that. So one day when I'm a more interesting person to have as a contestant, I do intend to apply, and I will continue to apply, and I will win. It
All
will
right.
happen. Mark my words.
All right. We'll start planning our Mythic Mind Survivor games.
I'll just give you, you know what, because I don't have anything to say. I'm just going to give you guys my resume right now to fill up my time. All right. State champion wrestler. Granted, it's a team championship, to be honest, not individual, team championship. 4-year ocean lifeguard and highly manipulative individual. So if there's a recipe for survivor success, I think that's it.
I'll make sure to tag them in this.
Okay.
I'm
And
sure they're
approach,
going to
no.
watch. Yeah. All right, cool. David, do you have any, Lady David, do you have anything for us? Sorry, my screens have moved around some.
It's okay.
Surprise.
Uh, yeah, I haven't watched a lot of TV or movies this year myself. I loved Andor. I'm currently watching through it a second time with a friend. One of the things that I love about Andor, apart from just how un-Star Wars it feels, a lot of times you have to remind yourself you're watching Star Wars. Not that it being Star Wars is a bad thing, but it's just such a different kind of story to take place in the Star Wars universe. I love how it doesn't carefully uh, telegraph everything to you. Like it respects your intelligence, and you have to be paying attention a lot of times to understand even what people are talking about, the subtleties of what's going on, and the machinations of both sides of the conflict. But uh, yeah, it's hard to talk about. It's just really good writing, and it's really well directed. Everything about it, I think, is just pitch perfect, and it's fun to watch Rogue One again after you have watched the Andor series, um, because it does. I feel like it has a little more gravity once you have this new backstory to it. Um, Movie wise, literally the only movie I saw at the theater was Tron Ares, just because I'm a lifelong Tron fan. And I know a lot of people were just planning to hate it because they don't like Jared Leto, but my son and I had a great time. He's always loved Tron as well, and we thought it was fun. We thought it fit in the universe just fine. Um, and yeah, it was interesting enough. Every like 10 years or 15 years, we get some neutron thing for the fans, and it just completely bombs. But I'm here for them whenever it happens.
Cool, cool. Sorry, I just don't have much to contribute to that. All right, Christopher, you have anything for us?
How do I recommend something without actually recommending it? But my wife and I watched the Twisted Metal series that they had that came out recently. It's completely absurd about everything you would expect from a game with such rich plot as Twisted Metal.
Yes, I did play the game a number of years ago.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't know why. I just found it amusing. Like,
Fair
just
enough.
from the sheer absurdity of the whole concept.
Fair enough. Uh, so yeah, I have to ask it in the game, like going back to the original game, what was there a plot? I don't recall.
I have no idea. I played it at a friend's house once or
I
twice.
I think it was just arena
Yeah.
vehicular combat
Yeah.
on the PlayStation. Yeah, with very metal looking weird dude, some guy standing in a couple of wheels and a clown in an
Right.
ice cream truck and yeah, that kind
I'm
of thing.
pretty sure they had scarcely more to work with than if they made a Minecraft mo or Minesweeper movie.
And and they used a lot of just, I think it was a lot of character development. I mean, a lot of them actually kind of, well, at least one of them sticks out, and that's the kid that drives the cab with the robot dad. And that just story from Twist Metal, I forget which one it was, but it's very Cowboy Bebop, that one episode where he's controlling his dad.
I mean, the character that they have for Sweet Tooth is just hilarious.
All right. Michael, do you have anything for us?
I think everything I could think of was like we watched last year because we had a newborn this year, so it's been a little tough to watch anything this year. I think the last show my wife and I finished was Free Run, which we're not anime people, but everybody kept talking about it, so we watched it, and I feel like it's an attempt at reconstructing generic fantasy in a way. It's the concept of Freerin is she's an elf. She's an elf maid. She was in the party of heroes that saved the world. And now it's 80 years later, and all of her friends are dying because she's going to live forever. And so a lot of it is very contemplative, her remembering the people that, she saved the world with and things like that. And so it's an interesting show. I think that was the last show we finished. I don't remember if it was at the beginning of this year or the end of last, though. So wasn't a good year for that on me.
Yeah, I definitely get the newborn thing. We got twin 4-year-olds and a 9-month-old.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the reality is I'm just not watching a lot of movies. If I sat down at nighttime to watch a movie, I'm gonna fall asleep. So it just is what it is. All right. Micah, what do you have for us?
Well, yeah, I haven't watched that much interesting. I guess I watched Home Alone again a couple of weeks ago with some friends. The first time I'd seen it since I was a kid, and that movie feels so different to watch as an adult. Like the neighbor, the guy with the beard, he's like my favorite character. He's awesome. Um, but outside of that, yeah, over the past few years, I've become somewhat disillusioned with just about all new Western Hollywood stuff. So I watch very little of like newer TV shows or anything. But I've gotten into anime because I'm more attached to like Eastern styles of storytelling, at least where that's at now. Which a lot of that has way more depth than I ever thought it would, because I didn't really get into anime until relatively recently. And Michael already mentioned Frieren. Frieren is awesome. Like one of my favorite TV shows the past several years. It's very, very slow burn, and you don't feel for a while like it's really going anywhere, but it plays with like interesting themes that I really like. Like I've always been fascinated by the idea of a character who's like functionally immortal and they struggle with relationships with people because everyone else around them dies. And they don't, they keep going. So it's like, how does that affect how you value relationships and how you even relate to people? And the main character, Frieren, like is dealing with that all through the story. And yeah, I just think it's really interesting. And everybody likes to talk about the demon arc where she confronts demons and explains to people that they act like they're people, but they're not. They are deceiving you, so that they can get what they want, and then they will kill you. And then that's actually what happens. So it's like it's playing the idea of good and evil more straight than I'm accustomed to seeing it in that arc. So really interesting story. Also
Or
recent,
families huddled against a wall crying.
yeah, there's some dark parts to it for sure.
Oh no, I was making, sorry, I didn't mean to, I was making a reference to the Rings of Power. Yeah,
Oh,
the
my bad.
crying
I've
of
never seen Rings of
families.
Power. I very much do not want to watch that. But yeah, the other series I've recently started watching with a friend is Steins Gate, which is based on a visual novel, and I'm probably very unusual in that I played the visual novel first a few years ago and loved it. But the anime is basically the exact same story. It's like a time travel story set in like mid 2000s Japan in like Akihabara. So like everybody there is a nerd and they're constantly talking nerd slang for specifically from that part of Japan in the mid 2000s, which is like very like
esoteric in terms of how the characters work. And it starts out where you kind of hate like all the characters. They're all annoying in different ways, but for some reason, somehow it gets you attached to like all of them by the end. I don't know how it does that. Like I hated the protagonist, but I loved him by the end because I guess he learned how much he actually cared about the people around him, and that's what made him endearing. And that's all against like a time travel setting, and like there's like almost slice of life in their lives until like the halfway point of the series, and then there's like almost like a switch flips and everything gets super dramatic really fast, and it gets very intense. And it's kind of like a fighting fate kind of theme where he's trying to figure out, is there a way to like use time travel to fix this problem? And he keeps having trouble figuring out how to do it. So really interesting story. I'd definitely recommend it if you like science fiction and time travel stuff. But that's me.
Good. And by the way, just because I'm not really engaging with anyone doesn't mean what you said isn't important. uh, Reverend David, what do you have for us?
So this was actually, I think, a down year in movies for myself, usually because I like seeing the Marvel movies, and there were two that came out this year that I have not seen yet. But I did see the Captain America movie, which it was okay. Nothing ground breaking there, but admittedly, a lot of what we watch, because we don't watch much, tends to be either more theology or more Pokemon related content. I picked up again watching Super Sentai, which is the Japanese show that uh, is behind Power Rangers, except it's a lot more serious than Power Rangers was. And it's good, clean television, right? Because that's what's so hard about watching a lot of modern television is just the language, um, uh, deconstructionism, sexual content, which admittedly is the reason why we stopped watching Andor after the first or second episode, because there is an implied moment of sex, and just you can't, you just I can't support that, especially as a pastor, which is unfortunate because from everything I hear, there's a lot of good storytelling in that show. But I we try to be careful with what we consume in that regard. So watching something like Tokusatsu shows, if I'm pronouncing that right, it's good, clean television with a clear delineation between good and evil. Like the current Kamen Rider season, it has this character who is the hero, but he's way in over his head. And despite the fact there are things he can't understand, and the villain is trying to get him to question the very good that he's fighting for, he still sees the good, and that is the motivation behind his heroic actions. And then Pokemon is just, it's a kid's show, but it's a good kid's show. And I've liked Pokemon ever since it came out when I was about 7 or 8, and they haven't given me a reason not to like it. So I'll yield my time.
Hey, you talk bad about Power Rangers, but that theme song melted an entire generation of boys' minds in like 1994.
Don't get it wrong. With the exception of the last 3 seasons, I have watched and in some cases re-watched it. If you stopped watching Power Rangers when you got into your teenage years, go back and watch Power Rangers Time Force. Power Rangers RPM, and Ninja Storm. You're still
Y-
going to get campiness. It's still a kid's show, but there's some good storytelling.
You know what's really interesting about Power Rangers, though, is that it is a strange relic of its fusion between Eastern and Western
Mm.
um, story. Because for those of you that don't know, I don't know how long it did. I don't know the full history of it, but a lot of um, the footage of them fighting in suits is actually from the Japanese shows that he's talking about. And anytime their helmets are off and it's Westerners acting, it was filmed for Power Rangers. And so they were taking footage of this Japanese show, cutting it up, making completely different stories in this completely different setting. So it's this very hybridized work that is just completely its own thing, unlike anything else.
I remember having a thought watching Power Rangers growing up, and the thought repeated itself pretty much every Marvel movie and Transformers movie that I watched is who decides to keep living in those cities where all the buildings are getting knocked down like every week?
Yeah, I can only
Like,
assume the insurance companies aren't operating there.
no.
The same people who inhabit Gotham City after the 15th Joker attack.
Right.
Yeah, if I can't get home insurance in Florida for hurricanes, I really hope they're not getting covered.
I mean, hey, you might be able to get Joker insurance in Gotham. It's just going to cost an awful lot to get that add on to your policy.
All right, let's see. Things have moved around on me. Kit, you should have something for us.
I have a lot for you guys, but so in for time's sake, this year what took home Best Picture is something I saw this year, and so that would be a Nora, which I do not recommend to anybody that cannot handle nudity. And it's all about a sex worker who gets plucked out into a Cinderella story, and uh, yeah, it doesn't go well for her because he's a Russian oligarch teenager that's yeah, he's a putz. But everybody that is in that film, it's just like the acting is brilliant. The directing, it took home four. Sean Baker, the director, took home four Oscars, which is a record for one single person to take. So it does have something, and I think the best part is this 10-minute scene where it's real time 10 minutes, and you're on the phone and you're just waiting and trying to hold on, and you just feel like you're just it moves along, and it's just so well done. Um, but on a more wholesome level, outside of the published works that we've done over at my podcast, it's I would say something that I saw this year that I won't be able to talk about till next year is currently on HBO. Um, it's part of the TMC collection, or yeah, Turner Classic Movie, TCM. Great Expectations, 1947. And this was one of the more recent ones that I saw, and it's freaking brilliant. It's influenced directors Tim Burton, Guillermo del Toro, which, side note, Frankenstein is better won Best Picture this year. Otherwise, yeah, Frankenstein is brilliant. Go watch that. But Great Expectations just has this wonderful redemption story to it in the way that it changes itself from the Dickens novel. But it is the first time that we see a book that becomes cinematic. Most people know Dickens at the time as a theatrical performance because Dickens was told in Britain just on the theater. And so he took the novel. This is director David Lean, who will also direct Bridge on the River Kwai. But he takes the novel and just makes it so it's really engaging. And it pops off the page. He uses German expressionism, which is probably one of my favorite art styles in cinema. And just the dark shadows and the gothic interior, exterior, but to have the darkness be penetrated by the light at the end, and even as the light pours in, um, the girl can't look at him until he calls her name. And like, I don't know, it moved me. It moved me. And I could gush over it, and I probably do. I still have to edit the episode, so we'll see how much I actually leave in there. But um, that one is brilliant. Otherwise, TV show wise, there might be something to say about Welcome to Derry if you're into horror and you are fine with the It series. Uh, they kind of, I mean, I'm kind of a sucker for creepy stuff, so I'm fine with the way it goes out. But obviously, if you're too squeamish, you're too squeamish. But it's interesting what they're able to create and actually have it be uh, like have a good story being told, especially since they're working backwards from a whole bunch of material. And now they're going back in time with their other seasons and they're making another movie out. I don't know how he's going to do it, but it's Bill Skarsgård just plays a really good Pennywise. So that one, and I could go on. I could go on, but I will leave it there.
All right. Dalen, have you gone yet this round? All right.
So I haven't read a ton, or I haven't watched all that much this year. I mean, I did watch Andor, rewatch season one, and then watch season two. Quite enjoyed that. People had already talked slightly about that. I also got around to watching the second season of Arcane, the League of Legends animated show, which the second season isn't, I don't know if it's quite as good as the first season, but it still manages to hit some remarkably poignant notes for a show based on the lore of a video game about five random champions fighting five other champions in a magical realm. You don't need to have played the game at all to understand it at all. I mean, they completely retcon any official lore entirely, but the animation is gorgeous. It's Western style animation. The um, voice actors are very good. There is the second season especially has a bit more. Actually, I guess both seasons do have some adult content, so it's not a blanket recommendation, but it is one of the better pieces of Western animation that I've seen for quite some time.
And Ian.
So I watched a ton of movies and TV. I'll restrict myself to a few. Movie wise, one that really kind of sticks out to me is The Gorge, which is sadly only on Apple TV, but it's basically just two actors, Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy, playing special forces operatives from the former Soviet states and the USA guarding a gorge in which there's a bunch of zombies which are caused by a secret. And it's not necessarily the most surprising secret, but the relationship between the two characters is really well drawn. And that's really the strength of the movie, I think. Um, kind of I'm squishing it in here because it doesn't fit anywhere else. Audible just did an audio drama of Pride and Prejudice. So it's basically a TV miniseries, but audio only, and they hired screen actors and a full score and full sound effects. But the thing that I really want to recommend is I love the 1995 BBC Pride and Prejudice, but it's a visual medium and it can't get as deeply into the psychology of Elizabeth's epiphany in the middle of the story when she reads a letter. And because audio drama can really get into the voiceover and the internal monologue, it takes advantage of the psychological quality of Austen that I rarely see in adaptation. So I really recommend that new Pride and Prejudice adaptation on Audible. The TV show Cobra Kai also ended this year. The ending wasn't quite as strong as the first three or four seasons, but it still emphasizes the thing about Cobra Kai that I think is really uh, salient today, which is that every single character in the show is both a bully and someone who is bullied. Everyone is a victim, but also an oppressor. And I think in our age of just extreme tribalism around the ideas of, well, I'm victimized because of my identity, I'm victimized because of my beliefs, I'm victimized because of my size, et cetera, et cetera. Seeing ourselves reflected so strongly in these characters who are at such odds, but we love both sides of the show, I think is one of the few times I've seen the idea of moral complexity and the way that we treat each other with such inhumanity, despite the fact that we're all attempting to grasp the best good as we understand it. And I know it's a silly karate soap opera based on an 80s sports movie, but it is really well done in the aspect of exploring what makes an action right. Are we good people, or do we have to keep doing good things? And I think that it really rewards watching it thoughtfully.
Good. And I'm glad to hear that the audio drama that went well. The last audio drama I listened to was BBC's That Hideous Strength, which was quite
No, that was
hideous.
bad.
No, that completely butchered the whole purpose of the text. But that's good. I'm glad they did Austin well. All right. Anything? Yeah, Micah said he doesn't know that they had adaptation. Yeah, it came out. I think it was sometime this last year. It had potential, like the aesthetics, like the like acting and whatnot was fine, but it's just they really cut out the heart of the story. I mean, the heart of this. Never mind. I talked about that another time. I need to stop now. All right, it's getting late. Last category. We're going to talk about games, right? We started a Mythic Mind Games podcast this time around, and anything that I have to recommend is pretty much the things that we talked about on that show. I just don't have time to go beyond that. I don't really have time to do that, but I enjoyed playing through the Final Fantasy 1 through 6, the pixel remasters. Strongly recommend those. I really like pixels. I don't know. I like the aesthetic. I feel like there's certain artistry to them. I don't know how much is nostalgia, how much is objective art appreciation. I don't know, but I definitely appreciate what they're doing there. And as we talked about in those episodes, that the limited capabilities that existed when those games were first made means that they have to prioritize things other than the flashiness that can get our attention today, right? And so there's a lot of depth in storytelling and enchantment and that sort of thing. Definitely recommend those, especially 4 and 6, obviously. And then Mass Effect, played that for the first time. Really enjoyed that. Really enjoyed these conversations that we had along the way. Definitely recommend those. But I have to say, my favorite game I played in this last year, and definitely one of my all-time favorite games now, Red Dead Redemption 2. Huge fan of the aesthetics, of the unnecessary emphasis on details and the vibes, but especially the story. As I said in one of the early episodes of the Games podcast, it's basically Cowboy Death of Ivan Ilyich by Tolstoy. And so there's a lot of, I think, strength in the narrative as well as in gameplay. So that's become one of my all-time favorite games. I recently played through the first Red Dead Redemption, which was fine. It's good. Just it doesn't hit the same levels of narrative storytelling or gameplay or anything like that. So it was fine, but it meant that I had to start two again. So that's where I am. All right. Kyle, I know you're focused on books. Have you played anything new this year?
Only one game have I started and finished. Uh, there's another game that I would love to talk about, but I know someone else is going to bring it up, so I won't even mention it. The game that I started and finished is The Witcher 3, which it's kind of like a gritty, brutal Polish fantasy. It's interesting to see. It's a great game. It's a very good game. If you want to just have fun playing a game, it's a great time. Uh, the it prompted me to read the stories, which are the prequel to the series of games, and it's interesting seeing the way that the author blends what is really just his personal nihilism with sort of these Polish myths. Um, I don't have enough to give more of a sort of dedicated analysis of it, but it's a good game. It's fun.
Yeah, I haven't played the Witcher games, although they are in my Steam library from the last Steam sale.
Yeah.
Because they're recommended by Chase, who I haven't seen in a while. So Chase, if you're watching this, you need to start showing up again. But yeah, he recommended those, and so we'll talk about those at some point on the show. All right, Kit, do you have any games to discuss?
I think the one that I would recommend that I completed in full until the DLC came out. That would be the Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, which is the story that should have been made into a movie. Instead, they went for Wheel of Time, or not Wheel of Time, but a Dial of Destiny. Sorry. Yeah, Dial of Destiny, which is great, and I have a friend that worked on that, so I mean, it's a wonderful film. But I'm going to say that Indiana Jones is so much better when it involves biblical archaeology. And every time that somewhere in the Bible or something that's of mythical proportions from the Bible that he's looking for makes it so much better. And this is one of those that takes you right back to that sense of adventure, that sense of we're actually uncovering something from uh, biblical times. And it's like, yes, keep going, keep doing, keep making the story. Um, the voice actor for it is Troy Baker, but he is so good at doing a young Harrison Ford. It's uncanny. So that is the one I would recommend.
Yeah, I've heard good things about that game. I was not a fan of the newest movie. I'm tired of seeing Harrison Ford, an embittered old man with relationship problems. It's Han Solo all over again. All right, Dalen, do you have anything?
No, unfortunately, I didn't really play any games this year, so
All right, Christopher,
Rock and Stone. A lot of Deep Rock Galactic with my kids. That's where I'm at right now.
Michael, anything for you?
I got to give the plug. I'm sure somebody else is going to say it too, but Clair Obscure Expedition 33 is a very fascinating game. It had the soundtrack is world class, like one of the greatest game soundtracks. There are places where I was just, as a music guy, my jaw just dropped. Like some key changes and vocal transitions during boss fights. I'm just like, whoa. But the thing that really impressed me about that soundtrack is just how many vocal tracks there were, how extensively they used not just choirs, but like solo voices, both male and female. Um, it's a good game. Story's very interesting. There's definitely a lot to talk about. I know you've kind of mentioned, Andrew, that sits on your radar for that. It's got a couple of different, very very significant themes to it, and it's definitely a game about dealing with grief, and I think it deals with that one very well. There's another theme in there that I have some issues with the ending that I think it kind of forgets about. So if you play Expedition 33, go read Leaf by Niggle afterwards, because Tolkien understands some of that some of the things about subcreation that I think that the writers of Expedition 33 didn't quite fully think about on. But that's a conversation for another time. It's despite me having some strong criticism of it. My strong criticism is because think really because so much else of it is so good. What it feels like, and this is basically what it is, it feels like a weird indie game that found a very big budget, and that's basically exactly what it is. So it's very rare to see a very high budget video game in 2025 that had a clear artistic vision of what it wants to be and wasn't concerned with how do I reach the masses and monetize this. So there's a lot to like about it, and there's stuff to talk about even on the things I didn't like. So good game. Good
Yeah,
game.
we will be talking about that in at some point in the next run of games. It's sitting in my library. I'll get there eventually.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one that I was saying I need to finish and I've
Mhm.
started. I will say the prologue's excellent.
Yeah,
The
there's the game starts, and about 20 minutes later, I'm like, I'm like wiping away tears because man, there's an intense, some intense stuff at the very start. It's like, how did
it,
you provoke that strong of an emotional reaction that quickly? The voice acting, the English voice acting is also really good.
yeah, it's
Oh.
so often when people intend for melancholy in the opening of a story, they really fail and it's just melodrama. It's just
Mm.
unearned. Oh, why should I feel bad about this? Like I don't care about these people. but Clair Obscur does it right. They do it absolutely right, and you feel the grief in the moment.
And I think the voice actors deserve a lot of credit for that because Charlie Cox's Gustav really is the guy that played Daredevil in the Marvel show, plays one of the main characters, plays Gustav, and his performance is really good. Like some of the best voice acting I've seen in a video game. And so that there's, like I said, the artistic vision, all of the stuff just really hits. It's good. That's all I'm gonna say. We'll talk more later.
Good. Yeah, I definitely look for, I'm glad that a number of people here have played the game so we can have some good conversation about it. And I will say that even if you don't play the game, you should still go read Leaf by Nickel.
Yes, yes, you should. And some people are like, how does that relate? Well, I'll have words. I have opinions.
Good. All right. Micah, what do you have for us?
All right, my time has come. Uh, yeah, so Michael already talked plenty about Clair Obscur. I'll just throw in like that's an amazing game. Like that's in the running for my favorite game of the year with like a couple other things. Like it's so artistically well executed. The themes are super interesting. Like even if you don't necessarily agree with like as far as it comes to a conclusion, like it's really thought provoking. It's like there's themes about like how you handle grief, like is escapism appropriate when you're dealing with grief, like that kind of thing. What's the relationship of like us to our subcreations, like that sort of thing, which got me thinking about like my relationships with my books as a writer. Like it's really fascinating stuff. Um, but yeah, we'll have another conversation about that game later. Sounds like. Uh, Tons of other games I played. A couple others that I want to call out. So, Silk Song is excellent. If you've ever played like Hollow Knight, like that's one of my favorite games like ever, and Silk Song is also awesome. Very difficult, not for the faint of heart, but it's a really, really cool game. Has a really interesting artistic aesthetic, kind of on the dark side, because it's like this world where like there's the people are bugs in this world, and there's like this kind of cultic citadel that all these bugs are doing pilgrimages to, and horrible things are going on there, and you end up going in and dealing with that problem. So it is on the dark side, but really interesting to play, and the game design is just exquisitely good, and very good like action and combat, like tons of bosses, and they all feel kind of like Mega Man X bosses, but like more methodical. Really good game. But this is where I have to restrain myself from going on for 45 minutes about like my favorite series of all time, which is the Trails series by Falcom. The first game, yeah, yeah. Michael is, I think, the only other person here who's played the series. But Trails in the Sky is was the first game in that series, and they released a remake of it this year. Trails in the Sky first chapter, and it I feel like a lot of people are sleeping on this game, but it is like legit amazing. Like one of my favorite games of all time. It's and a lot of it is because the story is really, really well done. Like it's got a ton of writing. Like we're talking like as much dialogue written as like all of Lord of the Rings, like super long script. But the character work is phenomenal. Like the main two characters are like almost like a YA romance, which sounds off-putting, but it's like actually well done. But like the main character is like this girl who like starts out as just like this complete teenage ditz who is really dumb, and all the other characters make fun of her for being kind of dumb all the time. But like over time, she grows on you and she actually matures. So it's like one of my favorite executions of like any kind of JRPG protagonist, but like especially when people talk about like writing good female characters, like she's written with like actual flaws that she has to grow out of, and she actually does grow out of them in really believable ways that feel really earned. Yeah, Estelle is her name. She's fantastic. Um, and yeah, and the whole series, like if you like, so it's all like an interconnected series, and like if you like reading like really long running fantasy series where you just like to just binge through like 10 books, like this is basically that as a video game series because they're all interconnected in like several different arcs, and it feels overwhelming to look at, but you can do it in like pieces. Like Trails in the Sky, you can basically just play the first two games and you're great on story. But it does like political drama surprisingly well in the course of the series. Like not as much Trails in the Sky, but like one of the later games is like deals with like a fantasy Hong Kong, where it's like caught between two major like big countries that are all like vying to control this tiny little valuable city. And there's a whole bunch of drama that goes out there. Like Trails in the Sky deals with like the idea of like how what does it mean to like build up a national defense against the threat of other countries, and like how much should you invest in that? Um, where you might not agree with his conclusions, but it's really interesting. All well as building out a ton of characters. Anyway, it's my favorite series of all time. Play Trails in the Sky. That's my recommendation after Clair Obscure. Like those are two like competing for my game of the year. So that's my thing.
Well, we'll have to put together a recommended games list in addition to our book list. Oh. All right, Reverend David, do you have anything?
Well, aside from playing games with friends like Halo and Star Wars Battlefront 2, um, I guess I'm gonna have to really try Expedition 33. I've heard so many people say a lot of good things about it, so that'll be something I'll check out later. I don't think anybody, based off of what I said about TV, will be surprised by this, but the probably the biggest game I've sunk a lot of time into is the latest Pokemon game, Legends ZA. Not as good as Legends Arceus, but I think Pokemon has demonstrated a better job at telling past stories than it is at telling future stories, or I guess more modern stories. But it was still it was still a good game, and if you're somebody that likes Pokemon, I don't think you'd be um disappointed by it. Uh, there's this thing within Pokemon. They have a lot of the games have gimmicks, and one of the more popular ones is Mega Evolution. And there's a Mega Evolution of a legendary that can sometimes look like the Sauron eye from the Lord of the Rings movies. So that was a neat little design choice. Um, but yeah, not too much with games. And honestly, I don't spend a lot of time focusing a lot on stories. More stories within games, I tend to be a little more objective, base in that sense. I or the person I'd like to get the story done, then do the side missions. But that's a personal preference. So I have played a few of the Final Fantasy games, but just didn't really consider the story that was being told. So that's why I've never participated in any of those things in those videos. But yeah, that's that those are my games. Hopefully, I'll have a lot to say about Expedition 33 next year.
Good. Yeah, I have to ask, the only Pokemon games that I played were Red and Yellow. Now, have they do they tell a story nowadays? Is there like a narrative?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Oh yeah, very much so. Yellow was my first game, by the way.
Yeah, because in my experience, the storytelling is, hey, I like shorts. Let's fight. Classic.
More to it.
I have the Game Boy emulator on my phone, and so like the Leaf Green and Emerald are my go-to if I'm sitting on a bus somewhere.
Nice. All right, Ian, do you have anything for us?
Yeah, in addition to playing through Mass Effect 2 and 3 for the first time for this podcast, that was a great experience. I have anyone who listened to those podcasts knows I have lots of criticisms of those games, but it was a really rich experience playing through them and then talking through them with you guys. I also played the new game Dispatch, which is from a bunch of former Telltale developers, and is a story-based superhero workplace kind of dark comedy slash drama. And as a fan of superheroes and superhero deconstructions and reconstructions, I really appreciated the look at that kind of genre from a more not grounded, but a more emotionally and relationship grounded perspective, and with warnings that it is fairly heavy on the language, violence, and some inappropriate content. You can filter that, and I actually enjoyed playing it a bit more with the filters. So those would be the games that I really benefited from this year, I would say.
All right. I mean, as we've hit the main categories I wanted to hit here. I mean, is there anything else from anything that anyone wanted to mention before we start to wrap?
Well,
Or
you
David, I didn't call
skipped.
on you. Oh no, sorry. I said my screens have moved around a few times. Please, David, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Because I didn't have anything to say about books, but I finished 21 video games this year, and now I'm going to talk about them all. No, I just wanted to touch on like three of them. Yeah, Claire Obscure. The main thing I'd say about that is I feel like the social media talk about it got a bit hyperbolic, and I'm afraid it may be one of those games that people try to gaslight us into believing was never any good in the near future. But it really is a great game, with death and loss and grief and impending doom always in the forefront of the story. I think they do a really good job of just talking about fighting against inevitability and just hoping for the better of the people that come behind you and things like that. So yeah, it's a great game. Probably my favorite game I played this year though was one that came out last year, and that's Metaphor ReFantazio. That was that won the Game Award for best RPG or something. But if you've ever played one of the Persona games, it is the gameplay of a Persona game put in an actual fantasy world instead of in modern day Tokyo, like all the Persona games are. And you're a character who has a novel that tells a story of our world. And he's fascinated, there's a fantasy world where everyone is one race and there's no magic, and he's considering the implications of what it would be like to live in a world like that. And it's interesting to have that kind of as a recurring theme as you go through what's ordinary life to him, but he has a fairy companion and all of these the team of different races, and you're in sort of a competition uh, with all of these other people, a popularity contest to see who can become the next king. And you're just an unknown guy, and you're sort of drawn into it. You're not really seeking to be the king, but you end up on this quest um, to gain this popularity. There's a giant floating face in the sky that is judging the popularity of everyone who's competing as you go on a quest around the continents to try and um, achieve certain goals and things like that. I loved it. I got the platinum trophy on it, which is not something that I usually bother to do. I had to play through it twice to do that, but I really enjoyed it. But the game that I'm playing right now, and I think I'll have finished by the end of the year, that really surprised me is Kingdom Come Deliverance. It's actually from 2018. I found a copy of it on Xbox for like $8 with all the DLC and stuff. And my pitch for that would be it's like the gameplay of Skyrim set in the real world in 1403 Czechoslovakia. And you're just the son of a blacksmith, and your city, your town of Skalitz, just gets wiped out by these invaders who come out of nowhere. You barely survive and escape, and are helping with refugees and things like that. But it has the storytelling of Witcher 3, better conversation trees. On all of the Bethesda games, whenever there's any dialogue to be delivered, it just zooms in on somebody's face looking dead into the camera, and it doesn't really have the the kind of emotion that you get from the way the storytelling is in a Mass Effect or The Witcher 3. So I appreciate that. But there's tons of real world history in it. Like it has a whole dictionary of things about what life was like at the time, and even notes about how they tried to portray it in the game, and what's a little bit different from how it was. But I've been really enjoying it. I even went on a somebody convicted me of my sins, and I wore sackcloth and walked barefoot on a pilgrimage of penance from the town of Sasau up to this other town to go to this church and stopping and like praying and asking God for forgiveness for various, for stealing or killing or whatever else along the way. And every character in the game, when you start talking to them, says, Jesus Christ be praised. That's how they greet you. So it's not, I mean, there's nudity and sex and lots of violence in the game. Uh, but I do think it does a more realistic depiction of what society was like, and there's a pretty fair handling of a lot of Christian beliefs and theology, which I thought was surprising. But it's actually made by a, a Czechoslovakian team, so they're writing about stuff that happened in their backyard. So I know the sequel to it came out this year, and it was up for a bunch of awards, but Claire Obscure won absolutely everything, so they didn't really get a chance. But after a break, I'm gonna play that one. I think probably next year. So that's my recommendation.
Although I did just see Claire Obscure lost one of its awards because of some AI use or something.
Oh yeah, there was some texture in there that they used AI to
That
make.
was
I
a
don't know.
that was a different show though, wasn't it? Wasn't that a different
I
competition?
think it was. It was like Indie Game Awards or something, which is separate from like the Game Awards where
Yeah.
it won
Right.
everything. There, I think it keeps everything.
Yeah. I still don't really feel like Claire Obscure should have been in the running for an indie game. I mean, I understand their team was kind of small, but like Silk Song, three people worked like 7 years to make that game, and I feel like that is a real indie endeavor. As much as I love Claire Obscure, I think they should have let somebody else have that category.
Yeah, I think of Clair Obscur as being like a double A game, which we haven't really had as much of in recent
Right.
years, where it's like not super high budget, but it's also not like three guys in a garage.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the Kingdom Come Deliverance games. I haven't played them, but just from seeing and hearing about them, I definitely feel like I'm going to end up picking them up at some point in the next year. So we'll have to chat about that a bit. All right. Well, definitely appreciate each of you coming up here. I'm glad that we had a good crowd. We will try to assemble together some lists of recommendations out of this conversation to post somewhere. And I really look forward to the various places that we are going in the coming year. But we'll go ahead and wrap it there. Till next time, Godspeed. All right, thank you for listening and thank you for being with Mythic Mind in 2025. There are many exciting things that await us moving forward in 2026. We've got some new courses coming up. I've got the Silmarillion coming up starting in February. I've got a course on Soaring Kierkegaard in the works. It's going to come out in the spring. And then in the fall or winter, somewhere around there, we'll be doing a course on C.S. Lewis. I haven't officially decided, but probably something like modern philosophy and that hideous strength. That's kind of what I'm thinking right now. But definitely the Silmarillion and Kierkegaard courses are locked in. We're going to start going to 2 episodes a week, at least for a while, of the main Mythic Mind podcast. We've got a new format with the Mythic Mind movies and shows podcast, in which instead of doing one long series, we'll be taking turns picking what we're going to watch, more of a movie club dynamic to that. And then over on Mythic Mind Games, we've got a number of things coming up. And make sure that you catch the previous episode if you want to see what's coming up over there so you can follow along with us. A lot of really cool stuff happening, and I would welcome you to support us. I welcome you to join us over at patreon.com/mythicmind. Any level of support gives you full access to our Discord server so you can engage in all the conversations and planning that we're having. Any level of patronage gives you all 3 podcasts delivered early and ad-free into a single feed and lets you join in the various chats that we have. And then, of course, there are higher levels of support. Tier 3 patronage will give you access to the special studies that we're running. And so that would be coming up, the Silmarillion and the Kierkegaard study. And so if you want to join with us in real time with those studies, become a Tier 3 patron. There is a discount for annual patronage. In fact, if you sign on as an annual patron at any level, before the end of 2025, that discount is at 50%. That's the best deal of the year. And so if you sign on at any level, then this is the time to do that. Become an annual patron. But if you want to join any of our studies, become an annual tier 3 patron, get access to everything. And so I hope that you'll join with us. I hope that you'll support the work that the Mythic Mind Fellowship is doing. But that is where I will wrap it for now. I hope that you had a very Merry Christmas. I hope that you have a Happy New Year. And I look forward to engaging with you next week as we move into 2026. Well, that's it for now. Until next time, Godspeed.